Welcome to This Explainer. The human brain is easily the most complex, least understood part of our entire bodies. It holds literally everything: our memories, our personalities, the very essence of who we are. But what if we could digitize it? Today, we're diving into the ultimate high-stakes competition of our time, the absolute sprint to merge the human mind with machines. We're going to break down how the race to control our brains is heating up. We'll look at the major players, the genuinely groundbreaking tech, and of course, the massive ethical questions looming right on the horizon. Okay, let's jump right in. Before we get to the modern contenders, we need to make sure we're on the same page about what we're actually talking about here. A brain-computer interface, or BCI, is exactly what it sounds like. It's tech that lets users control computers, smart home systems, or really any external device using absolutely nothing but their brain activity. I know, it sounds like pure science fiction, but as you'll see today, this future is literally already here. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the brain-computer dream, then move to Neuralink's ambition and flaws. After that, we'll check out the less invasive challengers, explore some insane breakthroughs in restoring speech, and finally, open the Pandora's box of brain tech. Starting off with Section 1, the brain-computer dream, from clunky headsets to high bandwidth. So, eavesdropping on our neurons isn't actually some brand new Silicon Valley concept. The dream actually stretches back a full century. Back in 1924, Hans Berger discovered the brain's electrical activity, which gave us the EEG. Now, for decades, the absolute best we could do were these incredibly bulky, clunky external headsets. They sat totally outside the body and offered a really low bandwidth connection. We're talking crude, basic brain signals. But the ultimate dream was always to build something elegant, something discrete, a direct, high bandwidth connection capable of translating rich, complex brain signals into digital commands in real time. That push to bridge the gap from academic prototypes to commercial reality brings us to 2016 and eventually the monumental milestones we just saw in 2024. Moving to Section 2, Neuralink's ambition and flaws, the Goliath of BCI. Neuralink's device, which they call the Link, operates on a totally unprecedented scale. The implant itself, it's just a coin-sized transmitter that sits perfectly flush with the skull. But the real magic, and honestly, the real challenge, lies beneath that. It packs 1,024 electrodes spread across 64 threads that are literally thinner than a single human hair. And here's the kicker. These threads physically penetrate 3 to 5 millimeters deep right into the brain tissue. Because human hands just aren't precise enough to do this safely, they actually designed a surgical robot, the R1, just to install it. And crucially, this thing is bidirectional, meaning it doesn't just read your thoughts, so you can, say, send an email. Theoretically, it can write signals back into the brain, like potentially stimulating the visual cortex of someone who is blind. To really wrap our heads around the impact of this, we have to look at the human element. In January 2024, Neuralink implanted the link into their very first human patient, Nolan Arbog. Nolan is a 29-year-old quadriplegic who lost the ability to move from his shoulders down after a swimming accident. He courageously stepped up to volunteer, saying that being the first at anything is an opportunity most people would take. And man, those initial results were astonishing. Just by thinking about it through the Link app, his thoughts translated directly to cursor control. Suddenly, he was moving cursors, sending texts, and playing video games with his mind at speeds we really hadn't seen before. But as we know, progress rarely comes without a few stumbling blocks. Just weeks after Nolan's landmark surgery, a pretty major issue popped up. 85% of the Link's electrodes actually retracted from his brain and completely stopped responding. The core issue here comes down to the fundamental nature of the implant itself. When you have needle-like threads penetrating brain tissue, it naturally causes a certain amount of brain damage and scarring. And when that scarring happens, the body can reject the foreign object, causing the electrodes to lose the signal. Now, Neuralink did manage to fix most of Nolan's immediate issues with a software update, so no second surgery was needed, but this underlying problem of tissue damage actually led to some pretty deep internal disagreements with the Neuralink itself. That takes us to Section 3, the less invasive challengers, precision and synchron. Watching Neuralink's penetrating method play out, several experts in the field thought, okay, there has to be a safer way. Let's actually compare two totally different philosophies here. One of Neuralink's original founders, Dr. Ben Rapoport, actually left the company over these exact safety concerns to co-found a rival startup called Precision Neuroscience. So on the left, you have Neuralink's approach, those penetrating threads that inevitably cause some tissue damage, which is driven largely by Elon Musk's ultimate goal of achieving human-AI symbiosis. But on the right, you have Precision Neuroscience. They use a surface-level film that causes zero tissue damage, and their mission is strictly 100% focused on medical care, not superfluous human enhancement. So, how exactly do they tap into the brain without causing any damage? The secret is in this fraction right here, 1/5. Precision's Layer 7 electrode array is mind-bogglingly thin, literally 1/5 the thickness of a single human hair. It's flexible enough to perfectly conform to the natural shape of the brain, sitting completely safely on the surface right underneath the skull. Think of it kind of like a piece of high-tech cerebral cling wrap. It still holds a massive 1,024 electrodes, exactly like Neuralink, but it causes zero scarring and, importantly, it's easily removable. Because this method is so inherently safe, researchers can actually place multiple arrays on a single patient at once. In fact, they've managed to place up to 4,096 electrodes on a human brain simultaneously, which they claim is a world record. And the results from their human pilot studies, conducted during actual brain surgeries, were deeply emotional. They managed to capture the highest resolution picture of human thought ever recorded. As one executive described it, seeing that level of data visualization live was so surreal, it literally gave them chills. But what if you could avoid opening the skull entirely? Enter a third contender, Synchron. They've created the absolute safest, completely surgery-free entry into the brain. Instead of drilling, their method uses the body's natural highways. First, they thread a catheter through the patient's circulatory system. Second, they navigate all the way up to the blood vessels resting right on the brain's surface. And finally, the device just unfolds inside the vessel, exactly like a standard medical stent. Now, the trade-off here is pretty straightforward. Because it's sitting inside a blood vessel rather than directly touching the brain, the signal quality is lower. But it is still perfectly strong enough for users to send texts and control smart devices, which makes it an absolutely massive breakthrough for patient safety. Next up, Section 4. Breakthroughs in restoring speech. The dark horse. While the shiny, newer startups are out there grabbing all the headlines, there's a dark horse in this race, quietly achieving absolute miracles. Let's talk about BlackRock Neurotech. And just to be crystal clear, they have absolutely no relation to the massive investment firm. Founded way back in 2008, they are the oldest, most experienced player in the game. Their Move Again system actually relies on older, rigid silicon microelectrodes that do penetrate the cortex. But what makes them truly special is how they pair that older hardware with cutting-edge AI. They can read a completely paralyzed patient's brain signals as they try to speak, feed that data into an AI decoding model, and in just 10 milliseconds translate those thoughts into audible speech, recreated using past recordings of the patient's very own voice. And the accuracy they are pulling off is just staggering, 99.6%. They recently implanted this system into a 45-year-old man with ALS who had lost the ability to be understood when speaking. Normally, these BCI systems take weeks, sometimes months, of grueling calibration. But with BlackRock, the very first time the patient tried to use it, the word appeared on the screen almost instantly. The patient started crying, his family started crying, even the researchers had to pause the experiment because literally everyone in the room was in tears. With a mere 30 minutes of training, the system achieved 99.6% word accuracy. Think about that. That is better than most smartphone voice dictation apps. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Pandora's Box of Brain Tech, the ethical finish line. As genuinely incredible as these medical miracles are, the potential for non-medical applications brings us straight to an ethical finish line. Here is a quick look at our current scoreboard. We have Neuralink, aggressively pushing for AI symbiosis using penetrating threads. We have Precision, aiming for safe, surface-level medical care. Synchron, offering surgery-free access via blood vessels. And BlackRock, using rigid arrays to totally restore human communication. We are looking at 4 entirely distinct philosophies, all intensely competing to decode the human mind. But as this industry absolutely explodes, we have to take a step back and impartially ask, just because we can do all of this, does it mean we should? We can basically break BCI applications down into 4 categories. First, treatment, like helping the blind see. Second, prevention, catching and mitigating neurological conditions early. Almost everyone universally celebrates these medical uses, but the waters get extremely murky when we cross over into enhancement and augmentation. Think about it. What happens if wealthy parents can just buy their children a BCI that grants a photographic memory or wildly faster reasoning skills? It creates massive legal and ethical divides. If your brain is hardwired to a computer, who actually owns the data your thoughts generate? Where is it being stored? And terrifyingly, what happens if an advertiser or a government hacks your brain's feed? Now, FDA regulations and HIPAA regimes are highly involved right now to ensure medical data privacy. But as we inevitably move toward everyday consumer tech, society is going to be forced to reckon with these questions. Which brings us to our final thought. For decades, merging mind and machine was just a fun sci-fi trope. Today, it is an active, heavily funded race with actual human beings already controlling computers with nothing but their thoughts. As this technology escapes the lab, moves through medical clinics, and eventually lands squarely in the consumer market, we all have to ask ourselves, if brain-computer interfaces become everyday consumer tech, what does it truly mean to be human? Are we actually ready for the next step in our own evolution? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity, and I'll catch you next time as we continue to decode the world around us.